Hi there, I'm Ahsan Ali, A. Shaw, and you're watching me on YouTube and Facebook Live. Today we are going to discuss currency and belief, and it's a continuation of the topic that we have discussed in the previous week, currency and credibility. The topic is currency and credibility and currency and belief. And we have discussed it in detail, but the topic is so vast that we thought at that time that we should discuss it at least two or three sessions on this subject and how big corporations manipulate the minds of ordinary people. For instance, Microsoft, they use their credibility to exploit the minds of ordinary people to they use their credibility to make people to invest in their stock, and they raise billions of dollars through stock. And to discuss this topic, my guest is none other than Edward Konowicz.
Yeah, hi. I
Hi
think
Ed.
what we
Hi
want to
Ed.
pursue. Yeah, hi. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing good.
Good.
So,
Well, what I like to pursue is a more metaphysical approach this time,
okay. Mm-hmm.
and which we're going to examine credibility and currency, and
Mm-hmm.
probably where we see the overlap is with credit cards,
Mm-hmm.
because people use credit cards as currency. Go to a
Mm-hmm.
store or
Mm-hmm.
restaurant, and rather than pay in cash,
Mm-hmm.
pay in a credit card, which is a loan
Mm-hmm.
that you have to pay off or
Mm-hmm.
um,
Okay.
and the credit card
Mm-hmm.
kind of has been expanded because you can
Mm-hmm.
have a stock account like with Schwab,
Mm-hmm.
and you can have banking privileges.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have a we used to have a separation of banking and real estate and investment. I think that was the Glass-Steagall Act in the
Mm-hmm.
United States.
Okay.
But brokers, which are people who sell stocks and bonds and investment portfolios, have moved into the banking area, and the
Mm-hmm.
banks have moved into stock investments.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this is too speculative, which means it's based a lot on confidence. But even a bank is based on confidence. This is a really a vast common topic discussed by economists. But
Mm-hmm.
in United States, and I think it's true for a lot of the world, a bank is not allowed to loan out more money than 90% of its savings. So if it has $100 in a savings account, it can loan up to $90 as a
Mm-hmm.
loan.
Mm-hmm.
And what really that loan does is it inflates the currency.
Mm-hmm.
And inflates the currency because let's say you borrowed $90 to have a plumber replace your sink. Well,
Mm-hmm.
now that plumber is going to be paid the $90, and let's say they open a savings account and place $40 into the bank. So the bank
Mm-hmm.
now has $100 of your first initial account. It loaded up out 90. Now it has 40 more dollars in there. So this is based on confidence in the bank, which
Mm-hmm.
is if everyone withdrew their money, there wouldn't be enough money, the bank would close.
Mm-hmm.
So confidence is close to credibility, which is are you believed in our culture?
Mm-hmm.
And for Microsoft has a monopoly to a large extent,
Mm-hmm.
and it has large investments in Apple. I don't know if it's still true, but I remember reading when Microsoft bought Apple stock to basically almost control its competitor.
Mm-hmm.
And so a monopoly can have a lot of credibility because you don't have much choice.
Mhm.
And what we want to look at is the complexity of the situation, but compare it to something simple. And
Mhm.
what I like to compare it to is ancient Egypt that did not have currency, that
Mhm.
you went to the bazaar or the market and you traded on your reputation,
Mhm.
which was your credibility.
Mhm. And we have also discussed it in the last week that, for instance, Microsoft, the annual profit of Microsoft is $1 billion, and they raise almost 12, 13, or $20 billion through stock. And the good thing about stock, for instance, if they are going to buy a loan from the bank, then they are liable to pay it back. On the other hand, the good thing about stock that they don't have the liability to pay it back. So it's not just a free money. On the other hand, people are told that if they buy the stock, then they will be the owner of the company. But that's not the true case.
No, the CEOs and the executive
Mm-hmm.
officers make most of the decisions, and the value of the stock is based somewhat on price to earnings,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the total price of the stocks out, and they're supposed to be under 15 to 1 ratio between earnings. So if Microsoft has earnings of $1 billion, they can have up to about $15 billion in stock issued. And
Mm-hmm.
that basically is free money because, unlike a loan from a bank,
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft does not have to pay back all the stock. Most of the time, you have to find someone else to buy the stock.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much better for a corporation to issue stocks that
Mm-hmm.
they normally sustain the price of the stock, particularly if their executives are going to sell their stock options. They may order Microsoft to buy back the stock to increase the price of the stock, and then they
Mm-hmm.
sell their stock options. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of that's the real inside trading
Mm-hmm.
is when a corporation buys back stock and raises the price of the stock, and the executives sell their stock. Now, I don't know whether that's legal. It's definitely not ethical.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a economic lawyer, so I don't know how legal that is in different countries. But what I want to
Mm-hmm.
get to here, we can cover the different terms which are understood in
Mm-hmm.
economics. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot safer to buy a Microsoft bond because Microsoft would be required to pay back a bond. And
Mm-hmm. Then the
particularly
stock.
people invest in municipal bonds and national bonds because the governments have more credibility. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, with a bond, you can turn it in. You don't have to find someone else to buy. But then the bond
Bond,
market
the bond
became,
is a kind of loan in simple words.
yeah, but people began trading in bonds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, normally you were supposed to buy a municipal or state bond and hold it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're when it matured, let's say you had a 10-year bond, so you held it for 10 years and
Mm-hmm.
you cashed it in at the bank and the government paid the amount of the
Mm-hmm.
bond. This is the
Mm-hmm.
debt. The debt
Mm-hmm.
is, but now what goes on is traders actually buy and borrow bonds and sell
Mm-hmm.
bonds. And this
Mm-hmm.
was a racket for a while because the
Mm-hmm.
Federal Reserve at times had zero interest on their loans. So a
Mm-hmm.
broker or a brokerage firm could buy U.S. bonds with a
Mm-hmm.
loan that had no interest. And even though the bond may only pay 1 or 2% interest, since they got a loan from the Federal Reserve with no interest to buy a
Mm-hmm.
bond with 1 or 2% interest, They made
Mhm.
millions of dollars without doing any real work. It was a bookkeeping
Mhm.
scam. I mean, it was
Mhm.
really a scam. The government would loan out money with no interest, and then people would take that money that they got with no interest and buy a bond that paid
Mhm.
2%.
No.
And then they would even borrow money from a bank to do that. So it becomes a huge issue. But what I'm trying to say is it's all based on credibility. If people
Mhm.
lost credibility in the system, they
Mhm.
wouldn't buy any of this and the system would collapse. So it's
Yes.
kind of like a threat. You either give your
Mhm.
credibility to a bank. If everyone withdrew their money from the bank would collapse. The country
Mhm.
couldn't pay its debts.
Mhm.
So it's a system based on credibility and confidence.
Mhm.
And
And
unfortunately, too
mhm.
much of these markets were based on, well, banks are based on a 10% reserve, which is basically confidence. So we
Mhm.
can too. And really, when we separated these functions, which was about 50 years ago, they were
Mhm.
more stable. At this
Mhm.
point, um, the stability is strange because basically corporations and businesses bankrupt, but it's a
Mhm.
slow process. They all don't bankrupt at the same time. But what I want
Mhm.
to get to is once you start doing these financial trades, there's
Mhm.
taxes. And what
Mhm.
really is a tax and what is going on today? And I think the exchange rates in families need to be understood, which is if you are in a family, you don't use
Mhm.
currency. You buy
Mhm.
gifts or you do favors for each other or work
Mhm.
for each other. There's no currency exchange. Therefore,
Mhm.
there's no tax burden,
Mhm.
which is your currency really is love.
Mhm.
If you have a community based on love and not money, you don't have to
Just
worry
like
about currency exchanges because your honor, your reputation, your love replaces
mhm.
currency.
Just
So
like
what has been
credibility.
going on, and we could
Just
use
like
religious interpretations to this,
mhm. Mhm.
is that currency and credit
Just
have
like
had
credibility is the currency for the banking and for the businesses.
yes.
And for the family system, love is the currency. You buy gifts, give favors to friends. Uh, is also a currency.
Yes, love is a currency.
Hmm.
And what we could say is that money is replacing love.
Hmm.
And I think we have to say that.
Hmm.
And we have to look at different ways that taxes go on,
Hmm.
which is I
Yeah,
think to some
you have risen a very good point, Ed. Uh, uh, Money is replacing currency. Yeah, no, currency is replacing love.
yes.
Yeah, I want you to focus on this point.
Yeah, I think it's not only a currency replacing love, it's
Hmm.
regulations
Hmm.
that make turn love into currency. I want to give an
Hmm.
example.
Hmm.
Most of us like breathing. We love breathing, right?
Yes.
And the government doesn't want you to do anything for free. It
Hmm.
wants to tax most things.
Hmm.
So if you buy food from a farmer,
Hmm.
in my country, we pay tax on that food,
Hmm.
which is the farmer is not giving you food. You've changed
Hmm.
love into currency, and then you
Hmm.
pay a tax on the currency. Well, how are you going to pay a tax on the oxygen you breathe, right?
Yes.
Well, we now pay a tax on the oxygen we breathe. We have to wear a mask.
Hmm.
So a tax is a burden. So when we go out in public or to a restaurant or a store, we're supposed to wear a mask. That's a
Hmm.
tax.
I think
Because
you should apply this rule, oxygen tax rule, at a bigger level. Just like the big corporations, they are polluting the environment. So I think they should be liable for tax for cleaning up the mess they have created.
Right. If they were loving, they would clean up the mess or
Yes.
reduce it.
Mm-hmm.
And which is pollution or
Mm-hmm.
toxicity
Mm-hmm.
is a tax, which is a
Mm-hmm.
burden. A tax is a burden. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I said I want to pursue the metaphysics of this, which is currency replaces love and a
Mm-hmm.
tax is a burden. So if I have to wear a mask,
Mm-hmm.
that's a tax. I
Mm-hmm.
have to now buy a mask. And what I will predict is the taxes increase. So what's going to be demanded is a more expensive mask, which is how you increase a tax on breathing is to require an expensive mask.
Mm-hmm.
So we now have a tax on breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And so how much more? And then what is the objective since there is no currency exchange really in the family
Mm-hmm.
because we take care of our children or take care of
Mm-hmm.
our grandparents? There's no
Mm-hmm.
currency. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like whatever controls the state wants to
Mm-hmm.
break up the family. So
Mm-hmm.
and I know in the United States and other countries, you could not visit for a while, your elder relatives. You could not allow a love exchange. That you were
Why?
not allowed to visit the elderly in nursing homes.
Why?
Well, the claim is they were subject to the COVID-19 virus. So, in order to
Mm-hmm.
protect them, you were not supposed to be in contact with them.
And so
And
it means you are paying tax.
right.
You are
That's the
paying
burden.
tax. Yes,
That's an
yes, you are
increased
paying
burden.
you have to wear a mask because you are paying the breathing tax, and
The
now
breathing tax.
yes, and now you can't visit your elderly people, friends, neighbors, or your loved ones because uh, because of the burden tax.
The burden, which is it's a tax, it's a burden,
Mhm,
which is you're
mhm,
adding a burden. Now, what that
mhm,
means is the person visiting their grandparents can bring
mhm,
food,
mhm,
can bring gifts,
mhm,
medicines they may need,
mhm,
and now the elderly has to rely on the nursing home or the doctors and nurses, which is based on currency. They have
mhm,
to have an extra tax.
mhm,
So what we're seeing with this pandemic is it's turning much of love or normal activities into
mhm,
tax burdens.
mhm,
And what's interesting is if we're using economic terms, we
mhm,
have more what I would say is spiritual insight.
mhm,
And that's very strange in terms of religion to get
mhm,
spiritual insight, economic terms to get
mhm,
spiritual insight. That love
mhm.
is being replaced by currency, and currency is based on belief.
Yes.
Now, the Romans understood this. The Roman Empire,
Mhm,
which took over the Greek Empire, and the Greek Empire reached into Pakistan and
mhm,
Afghanistan with
mhm,
Alexander the Great. But the
mhm,
Roman Empire knew that currency or wealth was based on belief.
mhm,
So they turned into a religion. The Roman
mhm.
Empire turned into the Roman Catholic Church
Yes.
and emphasized belief
Yes.
because belief is the basis of wealth.
Yes. And the belief also, the credibility is based on the belief. And the religion, when we talk about beliefs, and there's nothing more uh, stronger belief. The belief system of religion is stronger than any other belief.
Right. And so you can look at some of the
Mhm,
religious leaders like the Saudis, look all the money.
mhm, mhm,
You see a lot of money associated with belief.
yes.
But there's natural belief, which is love. Natural belief is
Mhm.
love, and that's what the prophet Jesus taught, which is
Mhm.
if I love my family or neighbors, we're not
Mhm.
exchanging in currency. We're
Mhm.
helping each other out directly. There's no burden, there's no tax
Mhm.
burden. If I don't believe in love,
Mhm.
then there's a burden. The currency implies a burden, which is
Mhm.
tax,
Mhm.
because the currency is issued by the state, and the state then becomes a belief system. Now,
Mhm.
what's going on today is the belief system is shifting from
Mhm.
religion to medicine. Medicine
Mhm.
is the new belief system,
Mhm.
which is the doctor is the new priest. And as a
Mhm.
result of that, the pharmaceutical companies and the hospitals are amassing huge amounts of wealth. So
Mhm.
wealth moves to where belief is. So
Mhm.
since people believe in medicine, that's where the money is moving to. So
You have raised a very good point. The wealth is related to belief. Whatever the people believe in, if you follow that pattern, then you are going to be wealthy.
yeah, let me give you an example. Bill Gates, who
Mhm.
was the head of Microsoft or a
Mhm.
major
Mhm.
controller of Microsoft, he
Mhm.
saw that people didn't believe in computers, they use them,
Mhm.
but they believe in medicine. So if he wants
Mhm.
to be wealthier, he
Mhm.
has to switch his firm or his business
Mhm.
from software to medicine because people use software, they don't believe in it, they believe in
Mhm.
medicine. So
Mhm.
if he's interested in accumulating more wealth, he
Mhm.
switches his emphasis to stronger beliefs like the Roman Empire. The Roman
Mhm.
Empire initially believed in armies.
Mhm.
The belief of the Roman Empire was the Roman legion.
Mhm.
They said, we're not making much money on this. People don't believe in war enough. They do believe in war, you know,
Mhm.
that war is
Yes.
holy,
Yes.
but they
When
but
when
they
you
believe
when you when you put the religion factor, the belief factor into it, then people would follow you.
right. And
Mhm.
you have control over their resources, which
Mhm.
is in a way currency is energy, is your
Mhm.
energy or your ability to work.
Mhm.
And so the Roman Empire switched from belief in soldiers and armies
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
religion.
Mhm.
So the Roman Empire now had people believe in religion,
Mhm.
and it could project through its priesthoods
Mhm.
around the world and collect a lot of wealth, a lot of
Mhm.
money. So religion became major capital, which is
Mhm.
if you can get people believing in something, you can
Mhm.
harvest money or currency.
Mhm.
And I think the
We,
prophets taught not to believe in the state, which
yeah,
was
I
to
think
believe in love.
you also given a very good example of Bill Gates, and he was the head. He still is the head of Microsoft and founder and head of Microsoft, and he has been making web applications and Windows and other operating systems, and people use them, but they don't believe him. And to to increase his wealth, he thought that the other people are uh, they believe in the medicine system. So he changed his focus to medicine.
Yes, and he used a foundation,
Mm-hmm.
which is charity, which
Mm-hmm.
is the new imperialists, which
Mm-hmm.
are the people who are interested in accumulating wealth,
Mm-hmm.
direct their wealth with charities or non
Mm-hmm.
governmental organizations. So
Mm-hmm.
Bill Gates now funds the World Health Organization
Mm-hmm.
because people believe in doctors. He's got
Mm-hmm.
to get people to believe in him to be
Mm-hmm.
super wealthy.
Yes. Once
So
you
it's
have,
about people's beliefs.
yes, and the
That
belief is backed by credibility. He
yes,
is
people have
rich. Once, yes, once you are rich, you are credible in the society. People will respect you because of the wealth. And now you want people to believe you. So you have to follow the pattern of belief system. Whatever the majority believe in it, you believe the same thing. So you would become more wealthy.
yes. So
Yeah.
so the super wealthy are interested in credibility, which
Hmm.
is they want to align with what people believe.
Hmm.
And today people believe in medicine.
Hmm.
And so Bill Gates, in order to make more money, in my
Hmm.
opinion,
Hmm.
switched his emphasis from software
Hmm.
to medicine because people believe more in medicine.
Hmm.
So he invested in the World Health Organization. He's
Hmm.
invested in the CDC, I think,
Hmm.
and broadcast networks, which is he's trying to direct people's beliefs
Hmm.
towards vaccines
Hmm.
and the new taxation, which is a mask. A
Hmm.
mask is a tax, a burden,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
For
also a
many people.
lockdown.
Hmm.
And once, what's interesting is we need to view things in life from different perspectives.
Hmm.
And let me make a very profound, powerful point.
Okay.
Your point of view changes the world.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to give you an example.
Hmm.
If I have a
Let me quote a very good quotation here. I don't know who wrote it. I think the world is made of words. If you know the words that the world is made of, then you can make of it whatever you wish. I think it is very precise here at this point. So, your
yeah,
point.
well, we could go to Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. You
Mm-hmm.
have to know the right word. Sesame
Mm-hmm.
is the right
Yes.
word is the key.
Yeah, the right word is the key to
Is
any
the key.
lock. To the lock.
The point that I want to make, which is a point in physics. Let's go look at
Mhm.
this from physics.
Okay.
Light can be a particle or a wave, two very
Mhm.
different things.
Mhm.
So if I detect light with a, a photometer, a photometer,
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
behaves like a particle.
Mhm.
It's called the photoelectric effect,
Mhm.
which is if light is a high enough frequency, high enough energy, it can
Mhm.
produce a current like in a solar cell.
Mhm.
So basically, light acts like a particle that collides with an electron and it
Mhm.
allows the electron to be knocked off the atom or molecule so you have
Mhm.
current. It allows a current flow. But
Mhm.
if I detect light with a lens or
Mhm.
with slits, it behaves
Mhm.
as a wave.
Mhm.
So light can behave either as a particle or a wave,
Mhm.
depending on your point of view.
Mhm.
So your point of view actually changes the nature of things.
Mhm.
So if I give you the point of view that the mask is
Mhm.
a tax,
Mhm.
people begin realizing it's a burden. It's an
Mhm.
imposed burden.
Mhm.
Now, however, money makes a big difference. So the Bill
Mhm.
Gates and the medical field that people believe in that have a
Mhm.
lot of economic influence say, no, the mask isn't a burden. It's protecting
Mhm.
you. It's a
Mhm.
shield. Now let's go back to the Roman Empire.
Mhm.
So people could say the taxes are a burden. I don't want to pay for all these Roman legions.
Mhm.
And what's the Caesar going to say?
Mhm.
Caesar's going to say the Roman legions are not a burden. They're protecting you. They're a
Mhm.
shield.
Mhm.
The same thing goes with the mask. The doctor will say the mask is not a burden. It's a shield protecting you. But
Mhm.
economics says it's a burden. It's a tax. It's an
Mhm.
added expense because if you're healthy, you don't have to be protected.
Yes.
So we have two different perspectives. We have the
Mhm.
Roman Empire perspective, which is
Mhm.
going to claim a tax is protecting you, it's paying
Mhm.
for the Roman legions to protect
Mhm.
you from the barbarians.
Mhm.
And then we have the viewpoint, no, it's a burden. I can't afford this tax. I can't afford
Mhm.
this much of an expense. And we
Mhm.
can view the mask in the same way. It's a burden or a tax. And it is a tax because you have to buy them, and then you have to
Mhm.
pay a tax when you buy them. You
Yes.
can't just breathe. If I walk into a store, I'm no longer allowed to breathe. I have to pay a tax or put a mask on. And I think
Mhm.
this gives you added insight, which is insight really is to look at things from a different perspective, to look
Mhm.
at Bill Gates not as someone who wants to love people or make life
Mhm.
better, but
Mhm.
someone who's an investor and he
Mhm.
wants to invest in the current beliefs, which is medicine.
Yes. Mhm. So
And
you have
and
to so you have to invest in the current belief system if you want to acquire more wealth. And he is doing the same thing.
right, which is how much of your life are you going to turn into
Mhm.
money?
Mhm.
That's the question. This is the King Midas.
Mhm.
Everything he touched turned into gold.
Mhm.
And today, everything is supposed to be turned into money, even breathing.
Mhm. Yes.
And so, what's the next thing is to destroy the family. If
Mhm.
evil controls the world
Mhm.
and wants to turn everything into money and
Mhm.
taxes and a burden, it's going to
Mhm.
try to break up the family. And they're already doing that by forbidding people to take care of their elderly.
Mhm.
And then the next step would be to remove children and put them in
Mhm.
quarantine, which is
Mhm.
the state wants to raise children in order
Mhm.
to turn more love into currency and to eradicate love. So,
Mhm.
what I think the religious prophets really taught was to
Mhm.
love and
Mhm.
not to turn things into currency,
Mhm.
which is false belief,
Mhm.
which is belief in the American Legion or the
Mhm.
Roman Legion
Mhm.
was false belief. To believe in Bill Gates or vaccines is false
Mhm.
belief.
Mhm.
And how they get you is some things work. Like you buy a car because it transports you. You can go
Mhm.
someplace in the car.
Mhm.
And that's not just belief, it's fact. I mean,
Mhm.
the car really does travel.
Mhm.
So you're not in just belief. And
Mhm.
medicine is half belief and half fact. That's where it's
Mhm.
confusing. Because a lot of, I would say, one third of medicine helps, saves lives and limb. One
Mhm.
third of medicine, approximately, is a waste of time and energy. And one
Mhm.
third of medicine actually harms and damages
Mhm.
you. So
Mhm.
you need choice. And this is
Mhm.
the thing when we're going to go into economics here again. The market needs to be competitive.
I
When
think
there
you
is a
should also
monopoly,
you can also add statistic here. So if the medicine works 90+%, so it's good. If it works at 50-50, so it's risky. If it works at 10% and 90% loss, so it's not a good medicine.
yeah, and they're not being evaluated correctly.
Hmm.
Like the
Yes.
PCR test is not
Hmm.
being evaluated by testing with COVID 19 samples on animals. So
Hmm.
we now have tests based on credibility, and they're not
Hmm.
credible tests. I want to make
Yes.
my point with Bill Gates. Bill
Hmm.
Gates is used to making a lot of money through monopoly.
Hmm.
We used to rely on the state, the government, the laws
Hmm.
to stop monopolies
Hmm.
so that there would be competition, which is choice.
Hmm.
So monopolies are part of the um, changing love into currency because you don't have choice. If
Mhm.
I have two choices, two restaurants or two operating system or three of them, or two
Mhm.
different medical approaches, different drugs, well, one thing may work for one person and
Mhm.
another thing may work for another person because
Mhm.
we're
But
all unique.
yes, but it's not gonna work for all the people, for
No, it's not going to
everyone.
work for everyone. So
Mhm.
you need choice. And when choice
Yes.
is removed, you have a monopoly. And so
Yes.
Bill Gates was used to a monopoly de facto, which means the reality was like 90% of the operating systems was
Mhm.
Microsoft. So
Yes.
that's a de facto by the
Mhm.
reality, by the
Mhm.
fact, it's a monopoly. So he went
Mhm.
from the monopoly of software,
Mhm.
and he wants a monopoly of vaccines where we don't have choice. And let me
Yes.
say, if we had choice,
Mhm.
which is a competitive market, we would
Mhm.
have a consumer report
Mhm.
evaluating different, let's say, tetanus vaccines.
Mhm.
But we don't have a choice. You go to a
Mhm.
doctor, he doesn't say, well, which brand do you want? In fact, if you're
Mhm.
going to get the tetanus vaccine, at the
Mhm.
same time, you're supposed to get the diphtheria vaccine
Mhm.
and the pertussis. And we know
Mhm.
the pertussis vaccine does not work well at all. But we're
Mhm.
not given choice. We can't
Mhm.
say, oh, I just want the tetanus vaccine. I don't
But you
want
don't
the
want.
pertussis.
Mhm.
So what we're dealing with is medicine is becoming like Bill Gates's Microsoft, more and more a monopoly. In fact, when I was
It's not.
young,
It's not. I think it's not Microsoft. All the tech companies. Take an example of Google. 85% of the searches, online searches, are from the Chrome from Google. And what about Facebook's? Facebook is also has dominated the social media market. What about Amazon? Amazon has dominated the online retail e-commerce business. So
that's
there
a,
is
that's
a
a
monopoly.
yeah, that's a great point, which is an
Mhm.
extension of what I said, is
Mhm.
what the tyranny today is. These
Mhm.
monopolies are
Mhm.
exerting more power, and they're
Mhm.
by law, by the state, they're closing down small businesses.
Mhm.
So you could go to Lowe's or Home Depot, and that's the
Mhm.
big hardware stores,
Mhm.
but you couldn't go to the local business and
Mhm.
buy screwdrivers or buy wood. They were closed.
Mhm.
So these monopolies, which Bill Gates represents, and Amazon and Google, these
Mhm.
monopolies have gained control of the government.
Mhm.
So we're now under, this is the definition of fascism. When,
Mhm.
when corporations control the government, we're
Mhm.
under fascism,
Mhm.
which is we're under a pretense of face that the
Mhm.
government's for the people, but the
Mhm.
government really is for the
for the
corporations
for the
accumulating.
corporations. And those corporations they hire lobbyists to do their bidding, and they can pass their own laws. For I think I was writing an article earlier today, and I found out a very interesting, a good thing that the State Department of U.S. they have filed a lawsuit against Google for monopoly because they are kicking out the competition in the search market.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's very difficult though because the courts have allowed this, particularly
Mhm.
through patents.
Mhm.
Probably the biggest threat is software patents.
Mhm.
Microsoft was filing
Mhm.
between 1 and 2,000 software patents a year.
Mhm.
That means if you were at home writing software,
Mhm.
you would need a team of like 12 patent lawyers
Mhm.
to research all the patents. And
Yes.
software is like mathematics. How do you put a patent on
Yes.
mathematics?
Mhm.
Because it's basically a numerical code
Mhm.
software, and certain
Mhm.
things are inevitable. And
Mhm.
to put a patent on it stifles or
Mhm.
block small businesses
Mhm.
from arising because they now
Mhm.
need to hire patent lawyers to research
Mhm.
what patents they may be in violation. And we
Mhm.
saw that go between Apple and Samsung.
Mhm.
And of course, in the US courts, Apple won and the South
Mhm.
Korean firm Samsung
Mhm.
lost
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
silly policies like over a shape, the shape of the
Mhm.
device.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with the interesting thing, the spirituality where we want more loving justice
Mhm.
can be described quite well economically.
Mhm.
Economic terms such
Mhm.
as monopoly,
Mhm.
and monopoly really is tyranny. It's like in the
Mhm.
United States, five
Mhm.
companies control all of mainstream media practically.
Mhm.
And they all are part of the same economic class, the board of directors,
Mhm.
all generally know each other on the different
Mhm.
major media and corporative boards.
Mhm.
They're a social group like the nobility of Europe.
Mhm.
So the nobility today are the boards of directors and um, the higher level consultants.
Mhm.
That's even politics. A presidential campaign may get
Mhm.
$10 million in contributions, and they can give $500,000 to one person because they're a quote political consultant.
Mhm.
So
So
a
can
lot of
you?
an economic bribery is going through campaign funds and political consultants. It's a system of
Oh,
favors.
you said earlier that we all want a loving justice, and when we say when we talk about the justice and the judicial system, it can't be loving because when you have to decide between right and wrong, there's a clear defining line between right and wrong. So it can't be loving.
Well, I mean, law is we're
Mhm.
discussing business law, and I'm not discouraging this as
Okay,
another
okay,
huge
man.
subject, but
Okay.
there is a skill to writing
Mhm.
laws
Mhm.
and a skill for assessing it, which is a
Mhm.
judge shouldn't just follow the law. The law is a guideline
Mhm.
because there's exterminating circumstances. For example, if you
Mhm.
walk down the street and someone hits you over a head
Mhm.
with a stick, you got to defend yourself. So even though you assaulted that person back, it
Mhm.
was an act of self defense.
Mhm.
So if you have a law against assault,
Mhm.
you need an exception. You have to tell whether it was self defense.
Mhm.
And so a judge is supposed to be able to use the law as a guideline. And how
Mhm.
law can become very wrong is with
Mhm.
what's going on in the United States was mandatory sentencing. Mandatory sentencing means the judge is not allowed to look at the reasons why something happened to assess the
Mhm.
level of guilt. Because it's
Mhm.
just not really guilty or not guilty. Some people
Mhm.
have excuses for
Mhm.
doing what they're doing. There's a big difference between someone taking a car and going over the
Mhm.
speed limit for fun because they want to
Mhm.
go 100 miles per hour and
Mhm.
someone whose family member is dying and they have to rush them to the hospital so they go over the speed limit. That's a big difference in breaking the law. In one
Mhm.
case, the person broke the law and was going fast to save the life of someone they love. In the other case, the person broke the law just to have fun and go faster in the car. So
Mhm.
a judge needs the ability to assess the level of guilt and the
Mhm.
justifications going on. And
Mhm.
there's an art to writing law, a skill to writing law to encourage that.
Mhm.
Some laws are written where they discourage justice because justice
Mhm.
means each person is different and
Mhm.
the actions have to be seen in the context of the overall actions.
Mhm.
But getting back here, the thing that's crippling
Yes,
business
yes,
was
we should get.
patents.
Mhm.
The patent courts have become abusive.
Mhm.
which is
I think
some,
yes, it has become the if we look at the lawsuit in the for the past few years, then this seems silly, as you said, that that one company is filing a lawsuit against us that they have stolen our design. So what is this? They have stolen our color. They have stolen our color scheme. So it seems silly, don't you think?
well, that's where a judge comes in or a
Mhm,
jury. You,
mhm,
you, I mean, if you just steal one color or two, or not steal, but if you made a copy so that people
mhm,
are tricked,
mhm,
so they think they're buying the original when they're buying a copy,
mhm,
then yeah, there's a case there. But
mhm,
you can't patent, really. You shouldn't patent a color, or you
mhm,
shouldn't patent a word.
mhm,
But then people have trademarks. I mean, we're not going to resolve all the intricacies of law here. I want
mhm.
to I want to go back to economics because I think
Okay.
we have a very powerful concept here that a
Yes.
lot of freedom and a lot of
Mhm,
love is
mhm,
being changed into currency now.
mhm,
And these corporations that have a monopoly are now extending the monopoly to medicine where you don't have
mhm.
a choice, which is
It also mhm.
for economics to function, you need a
Mhm.
choice, a
Yes.
free market.
It also reminds me some of the writings of Aldous Huxley, and he was right. Uh, it seems like the new world order is in place.
Well, it's being put into place,
Yes.
and this is where I would get even more spiritual.
Hmm.
It's being put in place because people don't believe in love enough. They don't believe
Hmm.
in a higher power. They
Hmm.
believe in money.
Hmm.
And as long as
They
people
believe in
believe
wealth.
in money,
Hmm.
you're going to have tyranny because
Hmm.
money is going to accumulate in monopolies, and those monopolies are going to deny choice, and they're going
Hmm.
to place burdens on people, whether it's toxins in the environment, whether it's wearing a mask to breathe. Monopolies are constantly thinking about how they can make more money by requiring more burdens. And if they control the government, the monopolies,
Hmm.
like the World Health Organization pretends it's a government.
Hmm.
But why is Bill Gates controlling a government function then?
Hmm.
The
I
World
think
Health Org
if we look at currency has already the wealth has already replaced many things. Uh, Currency, wealth is the new love. Wealth is the new reputation. Wealth is the new credibility, and wealth is the new family system. So there are many things that's already been in place. What
yeah,
do you see the future of it?
well, it's
In
getting
what
bleak. We're at a
yes.
we're at a point where we have to discover whether there
Mhm,
is any
mhm,
divinity. Do we have
mhm,
any
mhm,
inspiration that can allow us to
mhm,
sustain human choice? Because
mhm,
what's happening is monopolies like the medical field wants to claim we don't have a choice. We have to accept their vaccine. And if
mhm,
we don't accept their vaccine, they can
mhm,
boycott us where we can't buy food.
mhm.
And I actually, I'm going to cover this because we got 10 minutes.
No,
I
no
think it
problem.
goes back to the
Which
story
is
of Adam and Eve, where
okay.
Adam is seen in Islam as
Mhm,
the first prophet. And
mhm,
let me sort of explain why
mhm,
I'm going to retranslate Adam and
mhm,
Eve's story.
mhm,
So they're in the Garden of Eden, which we could
mhm,
see as the supermarket or the farm. They can
mhm,
eat of the many trees, but they're not supposed to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
mhm,
And God says you can't do this. But we have to
mhm,
remember who God was. In
mhm,
the ancient world, the ruler was God. Pharaoh was
mhm,
God. The
mhm,
king was God, your
mhm,
majesty. In
mhm,
fact, Augustus Caesar, who was the adopted son of Julius Gaius Caesar, claimed Caesar was a god. Augustus Caesar claimed he was son of God.
mhm,
So the title son of God that Jesus used was used a lot, not only by religious people, but by
mhm,
emperors and
mhm.
kings.
I would like
So
to
so
add one. I would like to add one more thing here. At that time, there was no currency. Knowledge was the currency at that time.
well, reputation.
Yes.
Reputation was your
Mhm,
honor. We still say
mhm,
that a lot, your honor,
mhm,
which is your
mhm,
reputation.
mhm,
And so that's based on memory.
mhm,
It's a system based more on who do you think is going to be trustworthy and return
mhm,
the favor in one way or the other.
mhm,
The but in Adam and Eve, they didn't have currency; they had rules.
mhm,
And I think usually God was translated into the ruler. So the ruler said, "You
mhm,
can eat and be on this farm or in this market or bazaar, but you can't
mhm,
eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil," meaning what
mhm,
your beliefs are, you have to follow what the ruler tells you is your beliefs. You can't have your
mhm,
own choice. So if you
mhm,
eat of the knowledge of good and evil, that that is the first prophet. The first prophet
mhm,
says you can choose what is good and what's evil. You don't have to
mhm,
follow the ruler. So I think
mhm,
the Garden of Eden was really the gardens of Babylon, which
mhm,
were food. You know,
mhm,
gardens of Babylon, I think, actually grew food.
mhm,
So once they decided to choose on their own and not follow the beliefs of the leader, they were
mhm,
cast out of Babylon.
mhm,
So the first man and woman was the first person, that's why they're prophets, to
mhm,
be able to choose good and evil on their own and not
mhm,
follow the ruler,
mhm,
God. The rulers
mhm,
claim to be God. So we
mhm,
mistranslate the story. The story was not about God in the sky,
mhm,
because the God actually walked in the
mhm,
garden and used the word we, which is what
mhm,
kings use because it's
mhm,
nobility. So when
mhm,
Adam and Eve chose
mhm,
to eat of the knowledge of good and evil, which was they're going to have their independent beliefs,
mhm,
then the king can't be as wealthy anymore because the king or the ruler wants to say, you have to believe as I believe.
yes.
So Bill Gates is trying to rule the world and say you have to believe in vaccines like I
Mhm,
believe. Like I tell you to believe, you have to believe in vaccines. And that's
mhm,
the same story of Adam and Eve. They weren't allowed
mhm,
to choose
mhm.
between good and evil.
So
So
we are not allowed to choose.
the first
Mhm,
prophet, Adam, says, no,
mhm,
we are going to risk being kicked out of the garden
mhm,
in order to choose. We're
mhm,
going to choose, not the king, not
mhm,
the ruler. And we go
mhm,
back to Moses. Moses
mhm,
says to the Pharaoh, you're not going to tell us what to believe. We're not going to
mhm,
believe in the Egyptians' God. We're going to
mhm,
believe as we want to believe.
mhm.
So it wasn't that the
So,
Jews were the
mhm,
chosen people,
mhm,
they were the choosing people. It's a mistranslation.
mhm.
The Jews or
So,
the Arabs, the descendants of the prophet, were not the
mhm,
chosen people.
mhm,
They were the people who could choose. They were the choosing people, which is they didn't have to follow the king's
mhm,
beliefs. They didn't
mhm,
have to follow the Babylonian gods. They didn't have to follow the Egyptian gods. We don't have to follow Bill Gates' God.
mhm,
which is
mhm,
vaccines. We don't have, we
mhm,
have the right to choose. So this
mhm,
is where it gets spiritual. Is there a higher Allah or God to
mhm,
protect us when we
mhm,
choose?
mhm. I think when we look at the higher power, then there's it's a the whole new topic, higher power. So why would it difficult for the people to believe in the ethics, in right and wrong, in morality, in love? Why is
You know,
it
the
so
people
difficult?
in power
Hmm.
want to insist and tell us what's right and wrong.
Hmm.
And as a result of that, people get bullied, particularly by currency, which
Hmm.
is the common beliefs. Because most people are going to believe Bill Gates or they're going to
Hmm.
believe the World Health Organization. They're going to
Because of the
follow the
credibility.
kings
Hmm.
because of credibility. And
Hmm.
once they follow and believe in the kings and the presidents and the Bill Gates and the doctors, they've
Hmm.
lost their freedom. They lost their freedom to choose,
Hmm.
which is called the free market. We
Hmm.
want competition. We don't want to tell have Microsoft be the only ones to make operating systems. And we
Hmm.
don't want Bill Gates to insist that we all have to take vaccines,
Hmm.
which is this is a monopoly. And we
Yes.
have the right to choose what we're going to eat, to eat
Hmm.
from the knowledge of good and evil.
Hmm.
And then
And
the king is going to try to kick us out of the garden.
hmm.
The king
And
God
this.
is saying is like the
Hmm.
Saudis. You got to
Hmm.
believe like we believe, or we're going to kill you. If
Yes.
you don't believe like I'm telling you to believe, if you don't
Hmm.
follow what we tell you to believe, we're not only going to not let you have currency, we're going to chop off your head because
Yes.
you decided to choose on your own. So
Hmm.
God's people
Hmm.
are the choosing people, the people who can
Hmm.
choose, who have
Hmm.
freedom. And I actually believe the word Allah is close to allow, which is to
Hmm.
allow choice.
Hmm.
So we as good people, loving people, we
Hmm.
allow, we allow
Hmm.
choice. And of
Hmm.
course, then what Satan is, oh, this is certain. You don't need choice. You're going to do what we tell you. It's going
Hmm.
to remove choice. So you're no longer the choosing people, not the chosen people,
Hmm. The
the
choosing
people who
people.
can choose.
Hmm.
So I think it's a mistranslation when
Hmm.
people say, oh, we're the chosen people. It doesn't matter
Hmm.
who your father is or your
Hmm.
grandfather. It doesn't
Hmm.
mean you were chosen by God. It
Hmm.
means you maintain divine law by allowing choice. You're the choosing people, that
Hmm.
you will choose what to believe. You're not going to just follow what the leader tells you to believe. And
Hmm.
then that's where the battle is. The struggle is to defend freedom, which is to defend to be allowed.
Hmm.
Allah is to allow choice,
Hmm.
freedom.
So the monopoly of belief, the monopoly of operating system industry, the monopoly of social media, the monopoly in the search engine. So these monopoly everywhere. All of those big corporations, they are kicking out the competition from the market. They have a powerful team of lawyers. They have a strong patent laws to protect their brand. So how how do we see the change?
Well, the change is um, people have to say no. They have to avoid
Mhm,
following them as much as possible.
mhm,
And
mhm,
we need confidence, which is
mhm,
credibility in our own
mhm,
faith, in our own sense of goodness and love, So we
mhm,
have to stop believing in Bill Gates or believing in the
mhm,
WHO
mhm,
and believe in learning,
mhm,
believe in what we learn is correct.
mhm,
So it requires faith
mhm,
because those in power
mhm,
are going to try to destroy us if we don't give them our belief, which is the
mhm,
currency. The
mhm,
people in power want us to believe in what they say, which is
mhm,
credibility, which really is credit, which really is currency, which is they want all the power turned into money.
mhm,
And we got to resist that. We got to be
mhm,
able to love, which is help
mhm,
people without putting a price on it, without
mhm,
putting a currency on it.
mhm,
So then we get right back to the prophet Jesus, who
mhm,
emphasizes love
mhm. And humanity.
and humanity. Yeah,
Yes,
which is freedom, choice.
yes, yes,
Let people choose, to allow
yes,
them to choose.
yes. So I think the topic we started last week, currency and credibility, and today we have discussed currency and belief in detail, and I think we have covered this topic pretty well.
Yeah, I think hopefully we got people thinking from a
Yes,
different point of view.
yes,
So they have
and
choice.
yes, and we will come up with some other subject in the next week. And if you have any questions, leave it in the comment box below, and I'll come back to you and I'll answer it as soon as I can. Thank you and good night.
Okay.